Right, before we actually start the meeting, we received some sad news today that John Freeman has passed away, former leader and mayor of this council. So if we can just have a minute silence in remembrance of, especially for the work he has done to this council in the past. To agenda item 1, apologies for absence, and we have 3.
Yes, apologies from Councillor Honeyman, Councillor Morag Evenden and Councillor Jim Lord. They all have other commitments, or work commitments or otherwise.
Thank you. Item 2, disclosure of interest. To deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests as defined under the C4 Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. I've just got one. I'm a member of the Secret Bonfire Society, so which puts on to agenda item 6.
Thank you.
Agenda item 3, public participation. I don't think I need to read this out as we have no members of the public here. Agenda item 4, planning applications. Planning applications received week commencing the 6th of September. LW/21/0463 18 Hamsey Lane. Listed application to remove 75mm non-load bearing blockwork partitions to create a larger kitchen area, to create a new opening from the kitchen area into the living room and install a new internal window in the petition, to change the front entrance door and windows to the east elevation. Right, lead on this one.
This wall that they intend removing from this grade 2 listed, I think it was put in there when they modernised it from a cow shed to a dwelling. So I think that's obviously within order, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes it more authentic and takes it back to its sort of original style. Yeah, I think it's a pretty carefully worked scheme, and it's good that people are doing this sort of work, giving the building more life, extending its life and bringing it more into sort of authentic shape as it historically was.
Are you making a proposal?
I would, yeah, if nobody else has got anything to say, I would propose that we accept that.
So find a seconder. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on it? So can I have a show of hands of supporting this application?
That's supported unanimously, thanks. Yeah, I actually seconded it. I thought took your vote as read. Try to say that.
LW/21/0590 50 Chichester Road. decision has already been made on this and it's been passed.
Are we? Why do we do that?
Uh,
It was left off the last meeting by mistake by me, the list for the 9th. But I wrote to the officer to ask if we could deal with it today, and he said it was okay for us to deal with it today. But I found out this afternoon that the decision was made on Tuesday, and I think what happened was that I'd asked for 2 decisions to be delayed. That's the Broad Street applications coming up, and Chichester because both had been inadvertently left off the 9th of September. And he'd okayed the Broad Street one, but had overlooked the fact that I'd asked for these 2 applications both to be delayed until the 30th so that we could have our input. So I think it's a genuine misunderstanding on his part, and the original mistake was mine, but I was hoping that it would be okay. So it's just one of those unfortunate combination of events that's caused it to be. I'll let him know. But I mean, I don't think it's a complaint issue. It's just one of those unfortunate things that arise.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, when we've considered balconies on semis or anything like that, we've been mindful. Put up obscured glass, and they've turned the planning application down, and yet this one seems to have been accepted.
Yes,
We don't really.
I was going to. That's another point I was going to query. This property is a subject of an application which was refused earlier this year. That refusal related to a large annex, I think a garage conversion or similar, in the grounds, in the garden, and a scheme similar to the one that's the subject of this application, the balcony and the conservatory. It was refused on the basis that the annex was similar to a new house, and we'd actually asked for a condition that it should be restricted to use with the dwelling. But Lewis refused it on the basis that the annex was akin to a new house, and that the conservatory and balcony were out of character. The decision was made to approve it, just the conservatory and balcony. The application has come back now. The decision was made to approve it by the case officer, and I looked at the report this afternoon to see how they'd overcome the problems with the conservatory and the balcony refusal, and it hadn't been mentioned at all in his report. In other words, the refusal earlier this year of the same sort of scheme hadn't been mentioned. So I was going to politely query that as well, because it may be that it was done in a hurry, and that's why we missed the deadline, if you like, and why it's unusual for a case officer not to take into account a refusal which was only made about 6 months earlier. It's very unusual. So, as I say, it's a case which is slightly mysterious, and I wasn't going to make a complaint about it, but I was going to point these things out to the officer and see what his response was. Because he's an officer I get on well with, who deals with a lot of our applications. And so, as I say, it's a bit of a mystery there. But we have to accept the decisions we made.
Thank you. Moving on to LW/21/0639, 31 Broad Street, single-storey rear extension for auxiliary retail use. Not sure which one this is. W.H. Smith. Yeah. One letter of objection, and also there's an objection from the county archaeologist because it doesn't meet the requirements of section 194 of the NPPM.
Yeah. up for you while you're voting.
Could anybody read the letter?
No.
I couldn't read.
I could read most of
Yeah.
it, not quite all of them.
It took a while.
Some
I
deciphering,
got
didn't
the
it?
gist of it. It was on an old shorthand notepad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see you objecting to it, but I don't know why.
Yeah, it was, one part was to do with St Leonard's being a grade 1 listed building. Can't remember those two reasons.
And no access or something
Yeah,
to the back of it.
Councillor Moore.
Can someone enlighten me as because I was led to believe when the Asset Working Party were looking at Seaford Town Council holdings that that piece of land was owned by Seaford Town
No,
Council.
it's behind Boots, which we own.
It isn't exactly the same, it joins the same piece of
Well,
land.
I think, no, I don't think so.
Really? Because I went and looked at it and I couldn't differentiate. It all seemed to be the same plot of land behind that wall where all the trees are growing. It all seems to be the same plot of land to me. There's no dividing line in it at all. Because and when I looked on the Seaford Town Council Assets Register, it's an oblong piece of land that we own, which goes right up to that bit, which is the, if you look on the map, which I looked at, I was trying to, can't get on the internet here, but you know the bit from Place Lane, which is the access on the north and south,
Yeah.
it goes right down to that wall, and then there's a flint wall that goes right the way down to the back of the fabric shop, is it?
Right, yes. By
So-
Ainsley's.
I thought all that bit was marked in red on the Assets Working Party register.
That's a good point.
So
because
I really would like to have it
Yeah.
cleared up, because we've had some discrepancies between, I mean, there's another plot of land, as we know, Fell Close. We don't know if we own that plot of land. Someone now has queried the fact that, do we actually own it? Well, it's actually on the Assets Register.
When we
So-
talked about the assets register, and I said, exactly where is it? They said, oh, it's just a little piece of land, just in a little corner.
Oh,
Well,
is it?
what you're describing is quite a big bit.
Well, is it just a tiny corner then that's behind Boots?
It's always been referred to the land behind Boots. And I must admit, when I first looked at this, I thought, not knowing which shop it was, I
Yeah.
thought, that's our land.
Yeah, that's right. But you think it is?
But then I thought, oh, well, you know, it's always been referred to the land behind Boots, but
Is
from
it
what
different?
you're saying,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be looked into.
Well,
Where do we go from there? Although,
we have to deal with this on the basis that
They
it's not our land. I can always look at it, after the meeting, but we have to deal with it on the basis that it's not our land, because the application is a certification on the application that the land belongs to the applicant,
yeah,
and we have to take that at face value. But if you want me to look into it, I will.
I think
Yeah.
it needs to.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Right.
please.
Mm-hmm.
You in agreement? Everybody in agreement with that?
Because that original, a couple of years ago, the Rotary was going to build a couple of garages in there. But they decided not to, because it would take up the parking spaces.
That's something I'll deal with tomorrow. As I say, we have to assume, we carry on dealing with this assuming that it's not our land.
Yeah, so
Or-
we just look at the application as it is, not thinking about the land and what is your, conclusions on it.
As far as the county archaeologist's objection is concerned, it mentions paragraph 194 of the policy framework. That is the guidance which requires any applicant where the land is likely to include heritage assets with archaeological interest, in this case adjacent to a graveyard and grade 1 listed church, then a heritage report is required. And you'll see in other applications that we deal with, there's often a heritage report. We had to do one for the Martello Toilets application because it's next to the Martello Tower. So what's lacking is that heritage report, which should be a sort of part and parcel of the application along with design and access statement and all the appropriate plans, and that hasn't been submitted in this case. So we have to deal with it on the basis that a heritage report will be required and that any archaeological requirements are made the subject of a condition that will be imposed, requiring them to, when they open up the site, to enable archaeologists to have an inspection over a number of weeks, just to check that it's not an important archaeological site, give the archaeologist a bit of time to dig around, if you like. So that's the situation. I think it relates to another application as well, lower on the list, this county archaeologist sort of...
on this map it doesn't really define, the...
Just a splotch or something.
Yes. Okay, so, Councillor Vaughan.
Yeah, on their design and access statement, they say that the extension will have no visual impact to the church and graveyard, but because the flint wall. But the flint wall isn't that tall, so it will have a visual impact on the church, especially as it's Grade 1 listed, and that flint wall is the boundary to the conservation area. So it will have an impact on the conservation area and a Grade 1 listed building. Because they will also have to remove vegetation, which is screening part of the building now to put up extension. So it will damage the view. So actually, I just object to it.
So find a seconder. Councillor Edson, any other comments on it?
I'm sorry, I didn't have a lot of time to look at this, so I didn't look at the access statement. Are they planning on is there a side access passageway that they're going to be able to access it by?
Through the shop, you're saying?
Through the shop. It's called a design and access statement.
So that basically the shop will be out of commission completely whilst they do this work.
We're just extending it back, so perhaps they'll just have a screen across, use the existing shop and then do all the work behind a screen at the back. But everything will have to come through.
I would like to ask Jeff, what's the situation when there are some substantial trees there now, which have obviously just grown up because no one's looked after it? Now that they're there, they're a kind of asset, if you like, for the town. Trees right in the centre of the town. Do they have to ask permission to take them down now, even though they're obviously just wild grown trees and they haven't been planted?
Well, any tree in a conservation area that they want to remove within a conservation area, you have to give notice to the council so that the council have an opportunity to put a preservation order on it. That's one of the rules of conservation areas.
This is on the other side of the wall at the moment. It's on this side, the boundary conservation line is that flint wall.
Oh, I see.
But then they are visual from the conservation.
Is part of the screening you were mentioning, is it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Councillor Ballmer was saying the removal of the screening will, with the low wall, will sort of worsen the impact on the conservation area. It's probably enough to say that. You're saying that the screening shouldn't be taken away, or the screening should stay, to screen the building. But the building, even with the screening and the wall, will still have an impact. It's just the screening will soften it slightly, but it will still have an unacceptable impact on the adjoining conservation area and the Grade 1 listed church and graveyard. Well, I think that's probably sufficient. If the trees are not specimens, we just refer to them as useful screening. Okay. But as I say, we probably don't need to mention the heritage asset issue if the members are minded to object to it along those lines. Then the heritage report issue is a bit superfluous. But we could always say, if the district council is minded to grant permission, it's assumed that there will be a proper heritage report demanded and that any archaeological requirements are made the subject of a condition. So we could add that just to show that we've taken into account that we've actually noticed that there's an archaeological problem there as well. So that can be a sort of second part to the decision, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, if they are minded to pass this,
Mm.
I mean, I think some of the retainment of some of the trees on the boundary should be kept, so
Yeah.
that they do form a screen.
Yes.
Um,
Some of the trees should be retained, and the archaeological point should be dealt with.
yeah, trees for screening.
If I can spell
Yeah.
archaeological.
The trouble with archaeology.
Yeah, it's quite interesting this, isn't
It
it?
is.
That in a time when a lot of shops are closing and retracting and, you know, with Amazon being very much to the fore, something like W.H. Smith's is going to try and expand when they
Well,
already own Sussex Booksellers as
Well,
well.
I'm wondering if they're going to close that one down, and that's why they're expanding
Oh, I
this
see.
one.
Oh, I see.
That's
together,
just my
aren't
thoughts,
Oh, I see. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
as, you know, as they, you know,
Did it say it's going to actually be shop space, or was it the warehouse?
retail.
Yeah,
Yes,
shop
retail.
space,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Yeah, I suppose that would make sense.
Yeah.
And have another empty shop on the house.
Other WH
They don't stay
go back
empty for very long.
No.
If you look, they're empty, and it's not very long before someone else takes over.
But
For
then
some time.
we're only surmising,
Mm. Yeah, I know.
you know.
No, I was just interested. This is kind of interesting thought. So.
So are we happy with that? We did have a second, didn't we?
Yeah.
Can I have show of hands?
That's unanimous objection.
Thank you. LW stroke 21 stroke 0676, 63 Maple Fields, single story rear extension and partial garage conversion. Let's leave on this one. Councillor Payne?
I had a look at the plans, I do feel it's going very, very close to 61. But, I'm surprised 61 didn't object.
Yeah.
But, I'm not sure if we can object because 61 did, if they don't care, do we? But I think we should at least note it.
It's an odd one because unless you actually view it from the rear,
Yeah.
it's a bit hard to,
Yeah,
No.
but I sort of looked at the plans and it is right against the wall.
yeah,
Which,
yeah. Are you making a proposal?
I suppose we reject it because of that.
Is that fine, a second then?
But fair enough.
Sorry. So, right, who, Councillor Paul?
I know it is close, but I think because there's no objections from the neighbours
Yeah, but
fine
it
with
just
it.
be that they're frightened of the owner. I mean, isn't that sort of part of our job that we sort of make sure that, you know,
I mean, you've got to look at the quality,
yeah,
you know, of the extension on the plan,
yeah.
you know.
I couldn't see
I
any
know-
other issues with it. So.
I know, you know, when we get lots of objections, it sort of sways you,
Yeah,
but you've got to look at what's before you.
yeah. I just thought it was really, really close to the wall. Anyway, fair enough.
Okay.
Do you want me to mention that there were some concerns about the proximity to number 61, but that overall the committee were happy to support the application?
Let's have
Yeah.
that first.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah, no.
After due consideration or something like that, you know. It doesn't do any harm to say that. And,
It might just bring LDC's attention to it.
yeah, if LDC have got the same sort of concern, then I think, well, yeah, perhaps you have a closer look at it and, you know, whatever.
Are you fine with that?
Yeah.
So it just
Is that fine?
records.
Seconder,
Mm.
Councillor Mead, and can I have a show of hands, please?
That's supported with that concern.
And those against?
Right.
Thank you. Planning applications received commencing Monday the 13th September. LW stroke 21 stroke 0600 Morrison Supermarket, Dane Road. propose external walls projection along the canopy line of existing supermarket, demolition of existing flush wall.
Chair, this is to extend the pharmacy.
Yes.
The unfortunate part about that is if you're walking under the canopy, if it's a wet day, then you've got to walk outside. But it's extending the pharmacy, and it's pretty obvious that they need a bigger space.
It's tiny, isn't it?
I think the canopy ends there, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And they're building it as an
Yeah.
extension to canopy, so.
Oh well, that's great. Yeah, yeah.
It is a bit ugly at the moment, that the wall facing Dane Road. There was a bit of variety in it. It's just one long brick wall, isn't it? The canopy is useful for sheltering, but it's.
Mind you, when we have our South West horizontal rain, I don't think that canopy shelters you anyway.
Especially from the sea. Yeah.
My only question was, did they own that bit of land?
Mm.
Oh,
Right, any other questions?
No, I'm happy to support it.
Okay, so I find a second then. Thank you, councillor Wilson, and can I have a show of hands, please?
That's supported unanimously. Thank you.
LW/21/0716, 154 Chinkton Cottages, Chinkton Lane, 2-storey side extension, detached garage and conversion of conservatory into a habitable room. Councillor Edson.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to the original one. In London, you can't do anything until you've got the archaeologists involved and everything. And in both these cases, they're in a part of Seaford with historical connections, isn't there? Broad Street and Chinkton. So I think personally, I attach importance to the archaeological consultation. It's just my personal view that I think that, obviously there are parts of this town where it's probably old farmland or whatever like that, it's not likely. But in Broad Street and in Chinkton Lane, that's just my personal opinion. I attach more importance to that sort of thing.
Picking up on that, he does say, as part of deserted medieval village, historic farm complex, a World War I army camp, which is on the boundary. So, it is significant. So, also it's, it's neighbouring the South Downs National Park and also the coastal heritage.
Yeah, it's the heritage coast and quite close to Chinkton Lane Conservation Area as well.
Sorry, Councillor.
Also, as an extension on its own, actually, it looks quite nice. And that, so can we support it subject to a heritage assessment?
Well, yes, on its own, it's all right, perhaps, in an urban setting. It's just, it does close the gap between, with the garage, close the gap between those two cottages, which at the moment are perfectly symmetrical. They're identical, same porch, same windows, same rendering, virtually. One's white, one's slightly cream. It does close the gap between that house and the adjoining property. And the thing about Chinkton Lane is that it's got various properties, various shapes and sizes. It's semi-rural in that they're sort of scattered along the lane. And to me, it's not just a question, the archaeology obviously is very important, but having walked down there yesterday and seen these cottages, they're quite close to the road, whereas the larger properties are set back. So it would be quite close to the lane. a large extension. And I just think it'd be a bit of a shame to spoil the symmetry of the cottages for a start, because they are sort of typical in a way farmers or artisans' cottages from the time. You're probably connected to Chington Farm originally. And, if you look at the extension, I mean, you know that there's a local plan policy relating to extensions. Just think that in this case it would fall foul of that. I mean, I'd normally sort of let the debate go, but when I looked at it yesterday, I just thought it would be a bit of a shame to lose the symmetry of these cottages, because they are completely, they are twins, if you like, and this is a large extension, and the garage along the extension would fill the gap, and it's an area where the gaps contribute to the character of the lane, because you've got views through to Cookmanhaven and the Downs, but as I say, if you put it in any other road in Seaford, in the urban area, fine. It's a bit like an urban extension in a semi-rural location to me. But
And I think we just decided that it was sort of neighbouring on the conservation area.
yes, it's quite close to the conservation area. It starts about 2 or 3 properties down towards Southfield Park from this property, so it's quite close. I think, in fact, the conservation area is quite close. So it's a sort of area of quality, if you like, special quality, where you've got the urban area sort of blending into the countryside without being over poetic about it. And as I say, I wouldn't normally make a point. I just let you decide. But as I say, I had a look yesterday because it's not on Street View, so I had to actually sort of go and have a look at it myself because I was a bit curious about the application. Couldn't look at it on the laptop, so I just.
Isn't the garage set back?
The garage is set back, so it
That's
sort of
what I
intrudes
did
even
like,
further into the countryside.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's down to you to decide. But
There are
those were
large
my thoughts.
gardens though.
Those
I
were my
thought
Where
thoughts.
it's backing onto.
I think the garage going back was more in line with the Seaford plan, that we didn't want the garages coming to the front. So that's why I thought that seems all right to me, and none of the neighbours objected either. So.
No. But it's just where it is. That's where I feel. So, anyway.
And they do have lots of trees and shrubs and things, so that will be.
So, are you making a proposal?
I'll see what everyone
Oh,
has
oh,
got to
oh,
say.
Particularly, I don't like this sort of thing, I really do. That people buy these lovely places and then they start wanting to put a bit here and put a bit there. Well, spend your money and go and buy a house somewhere else, because you're only turning it into the sort of place that you avoided when you bought this. But that's just my my personal opinion. I just don't like to see that sort of thing going on.
Yeah, it's just been sold, and there's a lot of work going on already, probably internally.
Yeah.
So can we have a proposal?
I would like to propose to reject on the grounds of out of character, it's just a close to conservation area, unbalancing the 2 cottages. I think it's kind of destroying a bit of historical nicety that we have in that area, which you don't have very many of them, as has been said. If you change too many of these things, you don't have those little iconic workmen's cottages which are just like they are. They turn it always into something else. I think they have a historical value. And if they want a bigger property, we'll sell that to somebody who wants a nice little property and buy something bigger somewhere else.
Property you can't afford it.
Make reference to the archaeologists.
Yeah, we'll have to add that, whatever the resolution had to add. Need for a heritage report.
There might not be a second as well.
As a final.
I think I'd second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edson. Any other comments? So I can have a show of hands objecting to this
Can I vote both ways? Because I see
Yeah.
both points of view.
I'm abstaining.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Can we have a show of hands? of the-
1, 2, 3 in favour of objecting.
Those against, or, you know, for the,
Those against objecting.
yeah. Can I have a show of hands of those, and those who abstaining?
So 3 abstentions.
You know that's a vote for. You know
Yeah,
that.
it's carried. It's supported by 3
Actually
votes to
vote
none.
for it.
Nem con.
I was in I can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, I can't go for it, but I can't object.
Right, LW stroke 21 stroke 0704, 33 Grove Road, demolition of existing store and outbuilding, erection of a single-storey rear extension with internal alterations and associated hard stroke soft landscaping works.
No, I thought that was right.
You're proposing to
Yes,
support?
I'll propose that.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? So can I have a show of hands for supporting the application?
Going back to Chington Cottages, just for a brief comment. As the proposers, they say that if they're minded to grant it, it clearly needs to have a heritage report submitted and any appropriate archaeological condition to be imposed. Because they haven't got a heritage report. As we did with Broad Street.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
I'm sorry, I thought
No, that's all right.
I
No,
thought
I-
that was taken as read.
Yeah, I should have mentioned it specifically.
No, that's
Okay.
great.
Thanks.
Okay. LW stroke 21 stroke 0730, 68 Hall Park Road, rear garden room with terrace. Councillor Edson?
I think once again this is Hall Park Road where I think this bit, does this bit overlook the valley of
Yeah.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've made the wrong decision on this before, so I have to. You're not overlooking it.
Councillor Vaughan?
Yeah, I said I'm quite happy to support this. As I say, and this house is set further back from the neighbouring property, so the roof terrace wouldn't be overlooking, and it's got a great big, lovely view it will have. So
It's got high balustrade as well,
yeah,
Yeah.
screening.
Obscured glass.
Mm.
Okay, so that's proposed by Councillor Edson, seconded by Councillor Vaughan. Now show of hands of support.
That's supported unanimously, thank you.
LW stroke 21 stroke 0613, 19 Albany Road, demolition of existing chalet bungalow and erection of 2 detached 4-bedroom houses. Right, Councillor Leake.
I'd like to object to this application. I think it's overdevelopment. I think they're very badly thought out houses. I think they've made them 4-bedroom just so that they can get the money. The living accommodation downstairs is tiny in comparison to the fact that it's got 4 bedrooms. It's got an integral garage, which I would have thought was a complete waste of time when you actually need more living area. There's been no thought given to sustainability of the houses at all. This is just a cursory saying, oh yes, we'll insulate according to government legislation. But I think if we're going to have, I feel we ought to object as a planning department of the council when we're looking for sustainability in our houses now, particularly with new builds. There's been no thought given to that at all. There's no renewables, there's nothing to do with that. You've got 2 parking spaces outside anyway. I don't know why they wouldn't create more living space inside. I think it's just a development purely for profit, and I think they just think they can cram it. It's really crammed in so tightly that on so many counts I would object to it.
I mean, I must admit, while you're building these properties, why not put solar panels on them, which they haven't mentioned, but they did mention about electrical hookups for cars.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I think it's a token.
Yeah, so you're proposing to object.
I would propose to object.
Does that find a seconder? Thank you, councillor Payne. Any other comments? Councillor Bourne?
You say the size of them are really tiny, they're actually way over what the minimum is for a four-bedroomed house, so they're not actually that tiny.
Right.
And I was going to say, I was happy to support them because we do need more family homes in Seaford. The only thing I would say was the side windows would require obscured glass. Obviously the bathrooms would, but there are landing windows.
Don't you think that the design is so bad, you come in through the front door, you have to go right the way through the sitting room and then through some other doors to get into the kitchen with your shopping? I mean, it's just badly designed.
You do on a lot of houses.
Yeah, but don't design a new house. I mean, a lot of houses just happen to be like that by default. But if you're going to design something, why not? You know, you're going to take all your shopping right the way through the living room and then round into the kitchen in order to be able to get to where you want to take all your shopping. I mean, every time, isn't that going to be just it's just madness. I mean, who's the architects? It's crazy. I mean, there's no, they haven't thought of convenience. They've just kind of thought of, oh yeah, it looks good. A bloke's designed it, obviously.
Right.
sorry, blokes, but I mean, yes.
Any other comments? So we've got a proposal on the table to object to this application by councillor Leake and seconded by councillor Payne. So can I have a show of hands of objecting to this application?
1, 2, objecting.
And those against of
Yeah,
objecting
sorry.
to?
No, I know what you're saying.
That's lost by 4 votes to 2, so we need
A new
proposal to support.
Councillor Bourne.
I propose that we support the application, but I would like to see obscured glass on all the side windows, so you're not overlooking neighbours.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to ask as well, you say there's 2 parking spaces, but there's 4 bedroom, that might lead to 3 or 4 cars wherever we go.
Well, there's a garage as well.
Still only 2 though, isn't it?
In what they call a sustainable location, which in a sense is close to bus routes, train, shops, etc., then the county's parking requirements will be lower in order to dissuade people from using cars. They try to sort of, that's the way they try to work it.
Lewis District have just agreed plans for flats and houses with no parking.
Really?
It's a car lot, yeah, it's a car called a car light scheme.
It's a sort of.
Do they then sell them with the condition you can't buy a car?
Kind of, yeah.
All right.
This is a method of education.
Where is that?
New Haven Police Station.
Yeah.
So happened with Eastbourne
Well,
Police
just-
Station.
It's also the case in the North Quarter in Lewis that the plans have just been discussed. But there are going to be certain places you can park, but not necessarily by the houses where you might be living. So it's all supposed to be
It's all
very
pedestrian, isn't it? They want
Yes,
it to
yeah,
make
yeah,
and they're going to
yeah.
have a car park.
yeah.
We're digressing a bit.
Sorry.
It's a second.
Although, can we ask that, to, like Councillor Leake has picked up on, for them to be more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, more renewables incorporated in the design. Well,
Yeah, because they can do that as a
Yeah,
condition.
I mean, it's the cheapest time to do it.
Yeah.
It's when the building.
Yeah.
Is that fine?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so can I have a show of hands of supporting this application, please?
With that condition, yes, because that's why I was rejected to it.
I see, that's five in favour.
And those against?
Fine, that's carried, supported 5-1 with those 2 provisos, obscure glazing and more renewables in the design, more renewable features in the design.
Right, LW/21/0727 to St Mary's Close. Councillor Meek?
I thought it was okay. I would support it.
Okay, is that fine, seconder? Councillor Bourne? Any other comments?
That's supported
Thank you.
unanimously.
I take it we've noted about the application of LW stroke 21/06660 Churchill Retirement Living, which will be on our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we can't talk about it, it says so.
I'll be circulating a report, just wanted to wait for the applications on this meeting to be out of the way before I sort of went on to the next meeting. I've done a report, just been finalised, which I'll circulate quite early on in the process, and before the agenda is circulated, because it's a major application, there's quite a few issues involved, so you'll have more time to consider the issues in the report and the application. So that will go out.
I did wonder if we're going to get a lot of public participation, whether we should move it to the church.
We've looked at different venues. A lot of the suitable venues are already booked, but I think almost certainly will be used. Well, we're looking at Clinton Centre at the moment, because a lot of the other venues that we'd normally use are booked. As I say, the Downs Leisure Centre's booked, where we dealt with the Newlands application. The View is booked. This we think will be too small, because there's two further applications for 3 Homefield Road that will also go to the 21st of October.
Oh, God, completely sleeping bags
So
then.
well, it just means that there'll probably be too few spaces here, definitely. So we're looking at the Clinton Centre and a few other venues in the town centre at the moment. Obviously, you'll be told as soon as the venues.
If we can't get a venue, can it be deferred again? Have we got time for it to be deferred?
Yeah, well, possibly,
Could we
because
have
it's a major application.
an additional meeting just for that one on a date that we can find a suitable venue?
Well, we'll wait and see if the Clinton Centre is available, because that's large enough and nicely located. That we're still inquiring there. So if we can't get the Clinton Centre, we can't think of another suitable venue, we'll look to see what other options we've got, other alternative dates and things like that. But it will be a bit of a squeeze here, I should think. But having said that, there's only 3 objections so far listed to the Sutton Road application. And with a major application like that, you may have expected a few more, but doesn't mean to say that there won't be more objections before the 21st of October, before our next meeting. We have to wait and see.
So, moving on to Tree Works, TW/21/0064/ TPO, it's actually 6-foot range,
Apologies for that.
crown reduction of 3 metres. I think it's Sycamore, isn't it?
Yeah, the reference is right, but the address is wrong.
Councillor Bournemouth?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to support this application.
Thank you. Is that fine, seconder? Thank you, councillor Payne. Any other comments? So can I show of hands of support in this application?
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item 5 on page 7, accessible parking spaces. So to present the committee with the outcome of the review of accessible parking spaces on seafront and subsequent recommendations. Councillor Payne.
Just on 22B, would it not be better to have the 2 parking spaces near the pedestrian crossing rather than going that? Because presumably it's people that aren't going to be able to walk quickly across that intersection. If they want to get into town or anything, they've got to walk down to the pedestrian crossing anyway. So I won't have them there, because there is actually 2 bays that are, let's call it, sort of side on to the road. Well, we've made those 2
Yeah.
disabled. It's right by so it's near the salts, it's near the front, it's near going down the hill, and it's also easy to walk into town rather than on a busy corner.
Yeah, I mean, the suggestions there, perhaps I shouldn't have suggested specific locations, because really the important point is to agree the principle that there should be more spaces on the seafront, and they should be in those general locations, because it's really for the, once East Sussex accept the principle, it's for them to decide where the safest and the most appropriate place is. So yes, we can suggest that
I thought
the
that
spaces.
suggestion was really good. That's
Yeah.
right. That's the only one I
Well,
thought.
yes, it's,
Yeah.
you see, East Sussex ultimately are the highway authority. We're hoping that they will accept the need for more spaces and in those general locations. As I said, perhaps I was a bit too specific in the report, but I mean, if you favour that location, we can put it in. It will go to full council on the 13th anyway. But I think really what we're asking for, what I'm asking for is a sort of full support for the need for at least 3 more pairs of spaces in those general locations. And also, I think Linda has got another comment on, maybe additional space as well, because at the moment, I mean, it's just although the county will say, well, the spaces are free anyway, it does get crowded there. And it's tended to get crowded over the last 2 summers. We all know why. It's the COVID and everything. People are sort of tending to stay at home. We've seen the effect of that the last 2 summers. So that accentuates the need for accessible spaces, I think. So.
Yeah, we're one of the few places from sort of Folkestone along to Berkshire, Portsmouth that you don't pay to park.
Yeah.
And we start asking for more parking spaces. East Sussex County Council will say, yes, you can have them as long as you have parking meters.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Obviously that's another question altogether. But it's just a question of access, really. And,
Well, I think we should recommend where we want spaces, and also make sure that they don't suddenly go mad and put them all over the place.
yeah. The general locations. As I say, rather than specific
So
locations.
those things that you also need to decide on, because obviously getting sort of equipment out the back and stuff
Exactly.
like that. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're going into the road,
You get for the echelon ones to sort of get exposed
Yeah.
at the back. You
I mean,
get your
it's-
knees cut off. Yeah.
they're bad enough for a car,
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
The ones that are side on.
yeah.
And include that on Emma?
Yeah. The side on ones near the zebra crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one,
I know I always park there, but I think it should go to disabled.
I think we should look at Martello, especially with the proposed planning of the new Martello toilets, where we're having disabled changing room and disabled cubicle. So I think it's necessary to have a disabled parking space there, because the one that's there is not.
No. It's a sort of informal one. It's just a white line, no yellow hatching or anything like that. The proper ones need the yellow hatching nowadays. You get wheelchairs in and out. It says disabled on it, but it's just a white line, and so it's on the curve of the Martello Tower, so it's not really suitable. Because it's not really fully accessible.
I don't know if you come across that, because it gives you, because then if you sort of come into it backwards, it gives you plenty of room to get the equipment out the back. So it's actually ideal, because it is a big wide space.
It hasn't got any space on the roadside though, has it?
It's just the
Yeah.
size of a normal car parking space.
Oh yeah, no, it needs to be extended because you need the extra,
Yeah.
I think it's an extra metre or 2 metres.
Yeah,
in there.
the yellow hatching and everything.
I just
they've got
think,
their specifications.
forward thinking
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
new toilets,
Oh,
that they
absolutely,
should be addressed with the proper parking space. Councillor Edson.
Yeah, that's why I'm a bit concerned about the parking spaces by Frankie's Cafe. Because they're side on, and
Well, it could go on the other side.
disabled parking needs that bit of space at the side. So that the parking spaces have got to be wider than normal, and each of them have got to have an area where you could open a door and with wheelchair because if you've got passengers, they're more likely to want to be sitting, you know, front seat where the room is.
And you've also got the vehicles which have the hoist for wheelchair from
Oh.
the back of the vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
So you need extra room at the back as well as the sides.
Could go on the other side of the road, I suppose. Would that be slightly better? You
The
wouldn't-
other side of the road, you can park anyway.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the wall, you know, in the way, would you? I don't know.
The trouble is, the residents park there as well, so it's,
Mm.
and if you put a bay there, you're then stuck with residents parking. Whereas if you did move them further along, you've got 2 to Martello, 2 on instead, 2 at at the zebra crossing.
Yeah.
You've actually spaced them out right the way along.
Well, yes, I was thinking it is the most popular part of the seafront, and you did need spaces in between the salts and splash point, as you said. So, I mean, perhaps 2 at the Martello would be better than having 1 or 2 at Frankie's. You know, as you say, as Councillor Bain, you know, split the splash point and salts gap that way rather than. But as I say, it's very Sussex to decide on the safety and the locations anyway. Mm.
Councillor Edson?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that those vehicles, you know, which you open up at the back and people can, you know, if they backed in to those nose-in parking spaces along the front by the sorts, you know, they would be safe because they would be backing out onto the esplanade.
Mm.
That's what I'm saying, do the side on ones, so that they can come out the side straight onto the promenade.
Mm.
And in fact, they'd have enough room to be able to get the wheelchair and get that onto the promenade without actually going into traffic.
See, not everyone wants to back on, do they?
Well, it's hard to back on
Yeah,
there
because
because
it's
they're
easier.
at a wrong angle. aren't
It's
they?
easier
The
to
whole
nose.
thing is,
It's easier to nose in, so it's easier to use side on ones, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's good to have, like Councillor Baines suggested, because we've got the wheelchair swing in the swords.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because another alternative is the area where the ice cream stand is. Yeah, at the bottom of Edinburgh Road.
yeah.
And any of those vehicles, you know, that do open up at the back to allow someone with a motorised wheelchair, you know, you can get to safety along the esplanade there.
Isn't that that 2.28? The 2 spaces.
Well, there's 2 spaces at Bonning Step nearest that, yeah. They're both side on, those 2 spaces, the first 2.
And it says you go up the hill.
Oh, it's onwards, yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think Martello is a really good alternative to Frankie's because you've got disabled toilets there.
Yeah.
Also, you've got the disabled access to the beach there.
Yeah.
We put it, a hard standing down onto the
Yeah.
beach.
So it's a better
I think it's certainly
better
should be two
location than Frankie's because it's
Should be
getting a
two.
bit hectic there.
Yeah.
It's just, as I say, just to provide something in between splash point and the salts.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you favour Martello
Yeah.
as the location for 2 spaces, or somewhere close to the unit, and we can make the point, obviously, that the facilities due, shortly, hopefully,
Yeah.
be upgraded, including disabled toilet.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
disabled
And changing places.
Yeah, changing places and the access
What
to
the
the
council's been doing, isn't it, is asking charities to take on parking in the Westfield when there's nothing, when they're not being used, so that people visiting have got somewhere to park.
I don't think many charities have taken it up actually.
No.
It's still under COVID restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, we've just got to look at, the actual spaces on the seafront. So,
So 2 at Bonning Step, 2 at the Salts, maybe side on, close to the zebra crossing, and 2 at the new, soon to be newly refurbished Martello toilets.
That's been said, that sentence for the last
Of course
45
they will.
years.
It's no good.
we
listed soon.
And if you emphasise that the new toilets are going to have adult,
Yeah, I've got
disabled adult changing,
yeah, adult and children's changing facilities and disabled access to the pool.
Chair, would we be pushing our luck to ask for 8? Or is that magical number 6?
they'll just make up their mind where it's best on the seafront. We can suggest, they may say no to the whole lot of it, but, you know,
Oh, no.
There's one at
you know, it's not
Buckle
really,
Car Park as well. Mm.
All right.
but
No, I was just trying.
where are you thinking?
Well, there's loads of them down there. It's just that someone who's able-bodied and driving a car would lose their.
Well, the western end of the seafront, you're talking about.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking. I was just thinking, well, if you can have 6, why can't you have 8? You know? But maybe that's pushing your luck, I suppose.
We weren't.
I don't know. What do you think?
We were thinking that the western end of the seafront, there's usually spaces available generally.
Yeah.
And there's an accessible space. I don't know why there's only one, but an accessible space by the toilets at the Buckle Car Park. One.
That's Lewis District Council.
Yeah, that's Lewis District Council.
But
yeah.
don't we own that land, the other side of Cricketfield Road? Is that not Seaford Town Council's responsibility? Yeah, no?
Well, the road between the
The
two,
road?
The unmade road.
Yeah, the kind of unmade road. So if we made that for disabled use only, that would be very near the toilets, wouldn't it?
There's issues with an unmade road.
There's 2 at Splash Point already.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's vital that they stay an unmade road, is it?
well, they're trying to turn it into a garden, aren't they?
Yeah,
Well, there has
Oh,
been
you're talking about
suggested-
Cliff Gardens?
yeah.
I was talking about the
The
parking.
Montello Road. What's it called, Montello Road?
Just before the Westfield.
Because, you know, the Cricketfield Road,
Yeah.
you're between the two fields, and then you've got like the extension, as it were, that goes down towards Splash Point.
Yeah, Cricketfield Road.
That's ours, isn't it?
Yeah, we could
So
provide
if
our
we
own-
decided to make an area along there, disabled
Cricketfield
park.
Road isn't ours.
No, not Cricketfield Road, but
Martello Road.
is that what they call Martello Road, the part that then carries on straight towards Splash Point?
We've got Cliff Gardens, that is definitely ours. The unmade road.
Yeah, and then you come back this way to the side of the Westfield, the east side of the Westfield. That's a rough road.
That's Martello Road.
Martello Road.
I mean, if that's ours, can't we?
Then we'd have to favour that, wouldn't we?
Great big potholes.
I mean, you can't drive a
We'll
car
do.
there.
The council,
Not good.
the council
Oh, right,
can't,
okay.
the council can't afford to go to that extent on.
Just a change.
Let's just get the toilets done first.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true.
No, it's always worth suggesting these things. So, are we happy with what we've got?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to,
Yeah, lovely.
As I say, if you want to rethink, it's going to full council, our next full council meeting.
Mhm.
So, other,
Yeah.
you know,
There's
when
gonna be
you're on the
other
seafront, you know, you think, oh, that might be a good place.
Yeah.
So can I have a proposer, that we recommend these, parking spaces to full council, at the next full council meeting? Thank you, councillor Payne, seconded, councillor Edson, show hands please.
That's unanimously supported. It will go on to council in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, to inform the committee of the proposed road closures for Seafield Combine Line on Saturday the 23rd of October. Any comments on this report?
No, I'm not going to say it.
Oh, I'm
Been
saying.
doing it for years, let's put our hands up and just say.
Yeah, I know, it's the same roads as they always go. Come on, your chair, you're our bonfire representative.
Councillor Payne, what would
No,
you like to
no.
say? No?
I just don't like fireworks.
Oh,
That was my cat.
Yeah,
Councillor
exactly.
Baldwin.
I think we should just support it.
Yeah, so do
It
I.
happens nearly every year, shall we say?
I think we've only missed 1 year because of storm, I can't remember the name now, and of course last year.
Yeah.
Proposed by Councillor Bordens, seconded by Councillor Payne, and can I show that, please?
That's supported, thank you.
Those against? Abstained. Thank you.
Hope the pictures were okay. Hope the pictures were okay rather than the
Yes, yes.
written out route. Trouble was,
Actually, you prefer the written out route.
well,
I can understand that.
that's what we were supplied with. I thought I'd just pass it on. That's the
I'm more used to reading the table than the
Yeah.
map, so.
society's application was in pictures as to.
Okay, agenda item 7. To notify the committee of decisions taken by Worcestershire Council on applications previously considered by this committee. Any comments on this report?
We'll give it Anfield Way, not we later.
You said there's 2 applications next time.
One's got a turret and the other one hasn't. I haven't looked at them yet because I like to get one
Yeah.
applications out of the way. From over the next few days, I'll start to look at the next one. But there are 2 applications, both scaled down a bit and slightly different. But I'll leave you to chew them over, and they'll come to the 21st meeting along with the Churchill application, which that's them. I'll get the report circulated on that early, so you can see what I think are the main points.
Any comments?
This chap is determined to get this through, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think to a certain
With a target, it won't.
No, no.
I mean,
And I don't like the idea of him digging a hole at the side of the building next to his next door neighbours.
No, I mean, that's the one I object to, and by the wall, you know. And I thought we dropped the turret last time.
Well,
Just put it back again. I mean, what's
The
the
only
point?
thing, the only thing that's missing is the garage at the front.
And Flint Wall will change.
Yeah.
yeah, so you need to have a close look at them, and maybe, well, hopefully there's a comparison between these 2 schemes and the scheme that was refused to make it easier to consider it. If not, I'll do my best maybe to understand.
The new planning numbers, so the existing plans must be still on the website.
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to.
And hopefully it's talked to his neighbours and they come to an agreement.
Computers to get all these plans up.
That's why the hard copies were so much easier to,
No, nobody gets hard copies nowadays at all.
What?
hard copies of the.
I think if you submit hard copies, they put them onto the system and destroy them. You know,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, when I was a solicitor at Eastbourne, pressure was put on me to do away with paper summonses. I mean, how silly is that? You know, they thought that they didn't want any paper at all. Even summonses for criminal cases should be done by email. I had to persuade them that, you know, you need paper summonses. You need to post them and everything like that.
Because it was always, you know,
But they're doing away with paper and plank.
sort of, you know, we asked that when it's major development like Newlands, that we
Yeah.
have a hard copy,
So-
because there's so much. Those days are gone now.
Yes, there was a lot more interest in Newlands straight away.
There's been quite a bit of talk about Sutton
Yeah.
ones. There's no Steve Residence Voice, a few people mentioned that. That's why I'm surprised there was only 3 so far. But I'd imagine as the sort of the time comes near, a lot more people raise it.
Right. So, it was,
Yeah, can I just say, at least we are in accord
yeah.
with the district.
Yeah, but there's no contrary
There's nothing there,
decisions.
there's no,
I think there was one made a couple of days ago, so that that wouldn't come into this report, would it? They've approved the bike parking in the station park.
Oh, have they?
And then, no,
If you go past there, not all the car parking spaces are full anyway. It's never full, that car park.
when you think about it, it's quite expensive to park there, whereas you park around the corner, it's cheaper a day, so.
Sorry, Lynn, there's just one other thing to mention about the 16 Road, which I mentioned. That's quite a controversial application, the block of flats on the corner, roughly in that direction, on the old garage site. And we were very concerned about how it fitted in with the block of flats next door, and also particularly the Steam Road conservation area, because it's where the modern buildings from the seafront come into the older buildings at this end of Steam Road. And there's been a lot of discussion with the officers and the developers, and it's been reported to the Lewes District Council's committee this Wednesday with a recommendation for approval. We think generally that not enough weight has been put on the impact on the conservation area. That's the main thing. Adam, Town Clerk, will be attending the meeting on Wednesday. I'm away, but I'm doing an address, if you like, for it, a speech or whatever you like to call it, a statement on behalf of the Town Council, and I think at least 2 or 3 objectors from Steam Road or the road off there will be there as well. It's at Lewes Town Hall on Wednesday at 5. So we're doing what we can. What I think it needs and what it hasn't had, if you recall the 3 Homefield Road application, we had a really strong conservation report from a consultant which was very influential and sort of in the end sort of led to the refusal really, because it was very strong, making the point that this was like a sort of country home in an urban setting. And 3 Homefield Road is right at the edge of the conservation area. So this block is also right on the edge of the Steam Road town centre conservation area, but they haven't, Lewes so far haven't commissioned or asked for a specific report from their conservation and design officer or consultant. I mean, sometimes they get an officer to do it, sometimes if the officers have got too much of a caseload, they'll go to a consultant, as they did in 3 Homefield Road. And the conservation input in the report is from a planning policy officer rather than a conservation officer. And with the history of it, with the comments that an inspector made back in 2010 on a similar scheme, which was before they went to a scheme for townhouses rather than a block, because the original proposal for a block of flats there was turned down on appeal. So they went to a sort of mixed development or went for a development of townhouses, which was never taken through. Now they've gone back to a block of, I think, 13 apartments or something like that, a very similar block to the appeal that was turned down, admittedly 11 years ago. So that's the basis of our objection, the impact on the properties at this end of the Steam Road, which are important properties in the conservation area. Some very attractive properties which give the conservation area of this part its character. So that's just for information. Obviously report back at the next meeting on what happened at the meeting on next Wednesday. Okay.
I think, like in your speech, said about a heritage report, lacking of a heritage report.
Yeah.
If that's put in, that might
I'll
give a fuel to the committee.
I'll have another comb through the officer's report to see if it's mentioned at all. But yes, it is an old part of the town which is likely to have heritage assets, archaeological assets, in the excavations. Yeah, I'll scour through the report again to see if it's mentioned at all.
I intend to go to that meeting to support the residents
Good.
who've been in contact with me.
Is it your local ward?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I say Adam, I would be there normally myself, but I'm away, so Adam's gonna, be there instead, which is good. I'm in touch with Roy, somebody. His email is not his name. His email is Hug something.
Plug.
He must be a keeper.
What is he, a councillor or something?
No, Steam Road resident who's sort of leading the objections.
Oh,
Roy somebody.
Roy.
And I've got an email for him.
I wonder if that's a joke. Because, one of the residents there has been complaining about it for a long time. She talks about some fella that knows more than she does about it. And she relies on him really. He's kind of the prop.
Yeah, it might be this. It's a nice sort of leading objector thing. So I'll give you some details afterwards if you like.
Yeah, great.
Could be any value in others of us, if we kept turning up, or just to provide some more.
It's 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, so it's not very convenient. But yes, I mean that's when it is. I'd be there if I could.
Yeah, I caught them.
You've got to register to speak.
Or you can just turn up and attend in moral support.
Yeah.
Oh, can you do that? Because the letter that one of these residents got, which happens to be a Labour member, and she sent me a copy of the letter because she's made application to attend and speak, and it says there you're allowed like one town or parish councillor.
Well, yeah,
But
I mean,
is
the town
that-
clerk's taking up that
To
space.
speak.
Oh, is it the
It's
town
just-
clerk is taking that on?
Yeah,
To speak on.
yeah.
Oh, I see. So I'll just go along for.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were intending to speak. weren't
Well, I
you?
intended to support their application.
I
And
see.
say
I see.
that's what I was going to speak about. Is the fact that what's facing that building
Yeah.
is the Marine Terrace, which I'm told is Georgian, and then you've got those Parliament Arms houses, which God knows how old they are.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just thinking about the little theatre. I mean, it's going to be
Oh, that's
absolutely
yeah, that's the long.
awful.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't asked members because normally we sort of do it ourselves because it's a 5-minute gap, a 5-minute slot you've got, 750 words, and I've done a statement sort of for Adam to read that just fits in with, hopefully, it's 750 words anyway, which should be the 5-minute slot. So,
The ward district councillor can also speak,
but
As
not,
well as.
as well as the town.
but the town council just gets one slot of 5 minutes, and so it can be either a member or an officer, but we've sort of jumped in there.
That's all right.
Yeah, that's all right.
Speak,
Like this says.
speak to
ward
the district
councillor.
councillors for that ward.
If you want to speak
I'll
on it.
phone them tomorrow and say the district councillors also could be your.
That's good.
Good, but, I'm not sure whether they know that. I think they should, but.
And on the applications, it has both the district ward councillors to ward contact on every application.
Oh, right. Okay. I'll
If you
be
go to the
speaking
tab
them.
that
I'll
says
speak to them
contacts,
tomorrow.
it will give you both the
Yeah.
district.
Well, thanks very much for that.
So, unless there's any other comments, then we note the report. Noted.
Noted.
That concludes the meeting at
8:20.
8:20.
Yeah.